Welcome to another episode of Rob Ride's Gen X Pop Culture. And on today's show, like we're going to probably try and do every single end of the month, is do a countdown of either the greatest songs of a particular year, the greatest TV shows of a particular year, or in this case, we're going to talk about some of the greatest movies of a particular year. And that year is 1982. 1982 was a big year for movies, especially summer flicks. It's considered one of the better years in the 1980s for films, and we're going to talk a little bit about the different films. I'm going to give you a rundown of the highest grossing films of that year, and then finally I'll end it with my personal top 10 movies from the year 1982. Let's get started. This is a great year for movies, and we'll go from there. Please like and subscribe if you like this content. Share this content if you like. I'd love to get more subscribers. And let's take it away. Let's start with the countdown of the top 10 grossing movies of 1982. Interesting year, especially that summer. You had so many summer hits. There were a couple re-releases that came out in 1982. For instance, Empire Strikes Back was re-released in 1982 for Return of the Jedi that came out in 1983. We're not counting any re-releases. We're just going to count movies that were actually released in 1982 and what they grossed. So, counting it down real quick, Annie, which grossed over $57 million. The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, which grossed $69 million. Poltergeist, which grossed $76 million. 48 Hours, $78 million. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, just a slight bit more with $78 million. Porky's with $105 million. Rocky III with $124 million. An Officer and a Gentleman with $129 million. Tootsie with $177 million. And the top grossing movie of the year, 1982, you could probably guess it, E.T. with $359 million. Wow. That's a lot, especially $1982. But you had a real good summer movie run. The fall was pretty good as well. There were a lot of great movies, and we're going to kind of go over kind of the sci-fi and action movies and some of the drama, and then we'll get the horror and the comedy coming up. But I'm going to just mention brief things about these movies. I'll tell you what I liked and what I saw. I don't have the entire list, so I may not name every single movie that came out in 1982. That would be a little bit more difficult to do. So what I'm going to do is probably name the top, 5, 10 movies that came out that most people are familiar with. So let's get started with your sci-fi action and some drama. Okay, there were a lot of great sci-fi and action movies released in 1982. Here's just a rundown of some of them. Blade Runner, classic. Love this movie. I may talk more about it because it might be in my top 10. Conan the Barbarian. Oh my goodness, I love this movie. It's for sure in my top 10. First Blood, great movie. That movie was so different if you watch it now because it really was about how they treated the Vietnam vets after they came back in the late 70s or in the 70s. And, it's interesting because I don't know if that exact scenario would ever play out in a town now, but it's a really good movie. Unfortunately, it really didn't make my top 10. 48 Hours is classic, vintage Eddie Murphy and Nick Nolte. It's hilarious. Tron, I love Tron. Great movie. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. I've already done a video on Star Trek II. If you get a chance, check that one out. A cult classic that I loved watching on cable. Always thought it was really cool. The Beastmaster, where he has those little ferrets. Pretty cool. Another one that came out in 1982 that I didn't realize came out then was The Road Warrior with Mel Gibson. Probably my favorite of the Mel Gibson Mad Max movies. Death Wish 2, Charles Bronson. Class of 1984, which is an interesting movie. And then The Sword and the Sorcerer, which, wow, that movie's unusual. You've got a 3-bladed sword and a sorcery. It got really, really violent. That movie was nuts, but it's a good one. A movie that I really love by Clint Eastwood that I didn't really, I liked the idea of it as a kid, but didn't really understand it until I became an adult, and that's Firefox. And that's the story of a, he's a soldier that has to go undercover. He knows how to speak Russian, and what he's tasked with doing is stealing a brand new stealth Russian plane. And it's really an interesting movie. It's really cool how he gets in and is able to accomplish his mission. Check that out if you get a chance. And then I got to mention, this is a cheesy movie. It's a fun B movie that I liked as a kid. I haven't seen in years, but Megaforce. It's kind of like a sci-fi version of G.I. Joe, and that's what I kind of liked about it as a kid. I don't know if it really holds up very well today, especially with a flying motorcycle, but it was fun back in the day. So a couple of like kids movies, animated movies that I definitely saw back then. The Dark Crystal. Oh my goodness, Jim Henson, masterpiece, great movie, a lot of fun. I think it still holds up well today. I always loved Jim Henson and his work. Another movie that was unique and unusual that I saw in animation when it came out on cable, The Last Unicorn. That movie is a Rankin Bass movie, and it's rather dark, but it's very good. And America did the soundtrack, so definitely check that out if you get a chance. Of course, the other movie that I like from 1982, The Secret of Nim, came out then. That was a really good one. And then a movie that I think I saw so many times, just flipping through channels on cable, Bugs Bunny 1001 Rabbit Tales. Basically, it's another one of those Bugs Bunny movies where they kind of give you just a little bit of new material, but they mainly take a lot of the shorts from the old Bugs Bunny cartoons. It's still great. Those are always so fun to watch. Check those out if you get a chance. Okay, for drama. You have a lot of great movies that came out that were dramatic. Sophie's Choice, which is an interesting film. I haven't ever really seen it all the way. I know the premise of it. It's always referenced. It's a classic dramatic movie. The movie that won Best Picture and I believe Best Actor that year, Ben Kingsley and Gandhi, which is an interesting movie about the life of Gandhi. An Officer and a Gentleman, which stars Richard Gere and Deborah Winger. And the thing that I always remember is the ending and the song Love Lift Us Up Where We Belong. I'm not going to sing it for you because I can't sing, but that's a great song. Rocky 3 is actually considered a drama here, but love Rocky 3. One of my favorite movies, probably one of my favorite Rocky movies as well. This movie is actually considered a drama. I saw it in high school. I love Pink Floyd, but the movie The Wall is a strange and unusual movie. It's got cartoon and live action mixed in it, and it's about a rock star. It's just really kind of trippy. The music's fantastic because it's the whole album of The Wall, but it's just a real creepy, weird movie. It's interesting. I'd rather listen to the album than watch that movie, to be honest with you. Diner is another great movie where it's kind of, you had like the nostalgia thing in the 1980s for like the 50s and 60s. So you had Diner and The Big Chill and some of these movies where they were revisiting what it was like back then, and a group of people that knew each other in college getting together. And then you had a Western, which the 80s really didn't have as many Westerns, kind of went away from that genre in the 80s, but The Man from Snowy River is a very popular Western drama in the 1980s. So that's a rundown of some of the sci-fi, action, and drama movies from the 1982. Let's talk about some of the horror movies because, wow, that was a great year for horror. And there's some wonderful comedies that came out in 1982. 1982 was a great year for both horror movies and comedy/musicals. Let's give you the rundown. We'll start with probably the greatest horror movie of all time. I'm talking about John Carpenter's The Thing. Oh my goodness, if you've not seen this movie, you'll be amazed. It had a lot of great practical effects, and Oh my goodness, it will scare you half to death. It's a great movie, a lot of fun to watch, and it has an interesting ending. Let me know if you want me to review that movie because I'd be happy to review it for my channel. Creep Show also came out in 1982. That movie still gives me a little bit of the willies. It's very interesting. It has a lot of different small stories put together, but Creep Show is just awesome. Poltergeist came out. I have no idea how Steven Spielberg got this to be a PG movie. I mean, you have the little girl and the ghosts and everything like that, and I can't believe it. But back then in 1982, you didn't yet have PG-13. That didn't happen until 1984. So somehow he was able to convince the ratings group to keep it PG, which just incredible. That's a fantastic movie. It's a classic. Cult classics also came out that year. One of the biggest cult classics is Swamp Thing. Very much a classic movie. You would always see it on USA Up all night. So the Swamp Thing was really good. And then I couldn't leave out this movie. It was the first time they did it in 3D. Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D, which is interesting. You get Jason coming at you with the slasher with your 3D glasses on. A lot of fun. Very interesting movie. Let's talk about the comedies. And probably the king of the comedies that takes the cake really in 1982 is Fast Times at Ridgemont High, starring Sean Penn. Just a hilarious movie. I'll talk more about it because it's in my top 10. Tootsie is also up there with Dustin Hoffman. Great comedy, very well known and really well acted and received a lot of awards for it. 1982 was also kind of the start of the kind of raunchy sex comedies. So you had Porky's that came out, and Revenge of the Nerds is another one of those raunchy movies that came out a couple of years later. So it was the start of something new, a different type of comedy. Porky's was one of those movies that would come on cable late at night that you watch with your friends when you spend the night. So yes, that those things did happen. There are a couple of musicals that really came out that were outstanding musical comedies. Annie was very popular. It has a lot of good songs to it. I as a guy, I didn't really care for it, but I'm familiar with the songs and some of the musical numbers. The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas came out that year with Burt Reynolds and Dolly Parton. And here in Texas, we kind of know the backstory between that. It does involve a little bit of the rivalry between Texas and Texas A&M, and it's supposedly based on a true story, but who knows for sure. There's always been rumors of a whorehouse that's between Austin and College Station that the winning team would always go to after the game. So, interesting movie. Check that out if you get a chance. The next one is Grease 2, starring Michelle Pfeiffer. Let me just say this. She was hot. I had a crush on her. That's why I watched the movie. That and my neighbor, Christy Parrish, in Columbus, Georgia, used to always come over and want to watch that movie every time. So it was like I couldn't get away from this movie. We watched it all the time. Another movie that I thought was hilarious, Richard Pryor starred in The Toy. That was always on cable. That was a very funny movie with him and Jackie Gleason. A lot of fun. Richard Pryor is just an incredible comedian, and he really does a great job in that movie and has a really good message at the end. Of course, one of the great comedies from 1982, Night Shift. Henry Winkler plays the straight guy, and he just does a great job. And then Michael Keaton, of course, is the wild guy, and his jumping jack flash and everything is just amazing. That movie's hilarious. Go see that if you haven't seen it. There might be more on that movie in a minute. Airplane 2 came out. It wasn't as good as the first Airplane, but you had a lot of fun humor in it. William Shatner has a cameo in that movie, and one of the highlights of it is that, so Airplane 2 is basically a shuttle flying to the moon, and Shatner's on the moon of the base trying to guide him in there, and he's looking through the periscope, and he's looking out at different things in space trying to find the shuttle, and he sees the Enterprise, which I think is probably one of the funniest scenes in the movie. That, and when they're walking through the doors, they're shh, 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 shh. So, making the sounds. It's hilarious. A Robin Williams movie that was kind of a drama comedy, The World According to Garp. It was interesting, kind of funny, kind of strange, but it's a good movie. And then there's like a cult classic movie that I always watched when it came on cable, probably because I had a crush on the girl in there, Chrissy McNeil, and it's called The Pirate Movie. The Pirate Movie always came on cable. I don't think that this movie holds up. It's kind of a comedic take on the Pirates of Penzance. But one of my favorite scenes from that movie, the reason why I liked it so much, was there's a sword fight scene where they spoof lightsabers and their swords become lightsabers. And ironically, the hero has a green lightsaber, which is funny because this movie came out in 1982 and Return of the Jedi, where Luke has a green lightsaber, didn't come out to the following year in 1983. So fun stuff. All right. So that's a rundown of some of the movies that came out in 1982. Let's get into my top 10, and we'll see if you agree with me on the top 10 movies of 1982. All right, let's get into my top 10 movies of 1982. These are movies that I think you should definitely see. A couple of movies that didn't quite make the cut that I absolutely love that would come close are definitely First Blood. I do like that movie. It's not quite in my top 10. It's a great movie. It's very interesting the way Stallone plays that character and how it went on to have a couple of sequels with the Rambo movies. But First Blood is probably the best of the Rambo movies, and it nearly is out of my top 10. Another movie that I really love that I mentioned before is Firefox with Clint Eastwood. Just a cool movie. I love the ships. I love the ending. I love how he goes and steals the ship. I love the spy intrigue. It's just an interesting movie in there. And then another movie that didn't quite make the list that I loved growing up, and I mentioned just a moment ago in comedies, is Richard Pryor and the Toy. I love that movie. I think it's hilarious. I used to watch it all the time when it came on cable, and it always cracked me up. So let's get into my top 10. No surprises if you kind of see some of the images on here. But number 10 is Poltergeist. Poltergeist is an absolute classic. It scared me a little bit because of the way that the ghosts work in that movie. But I can't believe what they did to get this movie made and how they did it. Spielberg had a lot of hands in it. Most people think that he may have directed it, but he didn't. And it got a PG rating. Probably should have been closer to R. Would have been PG-13 for sure if they had that rating. But Poltergeist is an absolute classic. If you get a chance, check it out. If you haven't seen it, definitely check Poltergeist out. For me as a kid, that movie kind of scared me more than any other ones because it had an element of realism to it. And I didn't know what was going to come out of the TV when I was watching the TV. So kind of crazy. All right. My number 9 film is Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Spicoli is one of the classic characters. That movie is just hilarious. I love the scene where he orders a pizza, a class, and the teacher gets mad at him, and the teacher's like, you can't do this on my time. And Spicoli's like, well, you're here and I'm here. Doesn't that make it our time? Sure, you wouldn't mind munching down on the little pizza on our time? So just classic. Love this movie. It's just so funny and just kind of the high school angst. And I really appreciated this later on in life, in high school and in college, when I could look back and really relate a little bit better to each of the characters in the movie. Great movie. A lot of fun. Very funny. The next one is the comedy Night Shift. Night Shift with Shelley Long is the other person that starred in it. I couldn't think of her name earlier. Shelley Long, Henry Winkler, and Michael Keaton do a fantastic job. It's basically two guys that work at a morgue, and for extra money, they decide to become pimps. And it's kind of crazy, kind of a wild comedy, but it's just a fun little comedy and a good story at the end and with what happens. It's just... Michael Keaton's hilarious in it, Henry Winkler plays somebody different than the Fonz. And then Shelley Long is great in it, in a role you wouldn't kind of see her in. And I think it's just Henry Winkler and Shelley Long. You see them in TV as different type characters. They play totally the opposite type characters in this movie, and I think that's what makes it unique. That's what makes it great. And then Michael Keaton, you really get a feel for him as an actor and his comedic timing, and everything he does in this movie is pretty hilarious. So check out Night Shift if you haven't. Number 7 is one of my favorite sci-fi movies. It's actually a Disney movie, Tron. I love this movie. I love the computer graphics. I loved the video game as a kid. We would take Frisbees and pretend we were throwing them as Tron discs. I remember going to see this film in the theaters. And, okay, bear with me because I've got a nearly identical memory and it's kind of scary. But I remember coming home from the theater that night, and in our yard was an armadillo. And I got out of the car and I tried to chase it, and it ran across the neighbor's yard. Those things were fast. Anyway, the fact that I can remember that and associate that with Tron is unique, but that's how my mind works. Anyway, but if you've never seen Tron, check it out. Didn't really think the sequel was as good. It had an interesting topic, but definitely the original Tron with Jeff Bridges is a fantastic film. The graphics may not hold up as well in 2024, but they were revolutionary for 1982, and I was definitely amazed by them as a kid, and I really love the movie and the video game. All right, number 6 on my list is probably my second or third favorite Rocky movie, Rocky 3. In this movie, you had Mr. T, who was incredible. This kicked off his career, and of course, in 1983, he starred in The A-Team, which was an amazing TV show. But I love Mr. T. I love this movie because this movie really goes into a different stage in Rocky's life. You had the first movie, which is, down on his luck guy gets a chance to fight the world heavyweight champion, and he fights him to, a decision that was in favor of Apollo Creed in the first one. And Rocky 1 is probably one of the best sports movies ever made. It's fantastic. Rocky 2 was good because it's like, how does he deal with that success and fame? Should he retire? His kid is born. He goes through a kind of lot of life stages, which I really like, and he fights Apollo again in that. And then Rocky 3, he deals with some really interesting things. It's really his internal fear. You see where he doesn't necessarily win. You see that it's Rocky versus himself in this movie, and it's a little bit more self-reflective. And I think Mr. T is the perfect foe for him. Mr. T is just awesome in this movie, and it's a fantastic, wonderful movie. You also get to see his relationship with Apollo Creed that forms outside the ring, which is really cool. Great movie. See Rocky 3. Really, the first 4 Rocky movies are incredible. And then I don't really recommend Rocky 5. I didn't think it was that good a movie, but Rocky Balboa does a great job of putting an end cap on the Rocky franchise. Those are the real 5 Rocky movies for me. Next on the list is probably my favorite of the Mad Max movies, The Road Warrior. Now, I didn't see this in the theater. I saw it on cable because I was too young, but loved it instantly. This was the coolest movie that I saw back in the 80s. Just with Australia and kind of the post-nuclear apocalyptic society trying to gain oil and gas, and just everything he does to defend these people is really cool. There's the kid with the boomerang. You got some other cool things going on in this movie. It's awesome, and Mel Gibson's fantastic in it. I love The Road Warrior. That's a really cool movie. Number 4 on my list is a movie that I actually didn't get to see until just this past year. I'd always heard about it. Always heard that it's one of the scariest movies ever made. I'm talking about The Thing. And The Thing is probably the most unique movie I've ever seen. Classic horror, classic effects. It's just incredible. It's guys that are in a Antarctic station, and they discover something, and I'm not going to give away the plot, but let's just say it's very, very interesting what happens with this creature that starts attacking all of them. And there's some interesting theories about who is the thing at the end. I'd love to give you my take on it, but let me know if you want me to review it. It is a fantastic, wonderful movie. Classic John Carpenter. Probably one of John Carpenter's best movies that he's ever made. He's made a lot of good ones, but this one's an absolute classic. Highly recommend it. Definitely see it if you haven't. Okay, my number 3 movie. We're entering in the top 3 here. I have to go with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Conan the Barbarian. I remember seeing this movie when I was a kid, when it came on cable with my parents. And it's just your classic sword and sorcery movie. Love Arnold in it. Love James Earl Jones, who's in it. Just everything that Conan goes through. Tracking down Thulsa Doom. It's just fantastic. Awesome, awesome fantasy. Just one of the coolest movies ever made. One of Schwarzenegger's best movies. I think it gets overlooked by his Terminator movies, and a little bit by Predator, which Predator is awesome as well. But Conan the Barbarian is fantastic. And also, if you get a chance to get the DVD with the commentary, it's hilarious to listen to John Milius and Arnold Schwarzenegger talk about the movie. It's a lot of fun, especially with what Arnold says in it. Just hilarious. All right, my number 2 movie is Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. I remember going to see this in the movie theater with my family. It just is the best, bar none, Star Trek movie ever made, really. The best of the original crew, the best ever. It's flawless. It's amazing. I love this movie. I did a review on it if you want to check it out, but it's just fantastic. I love this movie and can watch it anytime it's on. It's just a wonderful movie and one of the best. All right, for my number 1, I actually have a tie for my top movie from 1982. Both these movies are incredible. Blade Runner and E.T. So Blade Runner is incredible. Ridley Scott, he's done a couple of different cuts of the movie. Definitely, if you get a chance, check out the final director's cut, which has some cut scenes that help explain it. Blade Runner is fantastic. I tell you that Harrison Ford does an amazing job in it. And then you've got the bad guys that are in it. Rutger Hauer's speech is phenomenal at the end. Rutger Hauer plays the bad guy, and he's fantastic in the movie. If you want me to do a review of this movie, I'd love to. I actually did meet Ridley Scott during the screening of one of the movies in Dallas, and he did reveal something about this movie that I would love to tell you on the review. So let me know if you want me to review it. And then, finally, the other movie that's tied is one of the few movies I've ever cried in, E.T. E.T. I think I saw 2 or 3 times that year. I love that movie. Spielberg just captured my imagination with it. And, the part where E.T. dies is the part where I had Niagara Falls. But it's a fun movie. I love the music in it. It's just a fantastic movie that tears at your heartstrings. Let me know if you want me to review E.T. because there's a lot to that movie, and I absolutely adore it. It's one of the greatest films ever made. Anyway, that's my rundown for the top films in 1982. I hope you enjoyed it. What are your favorite movies from 1982? What did you like about some of these movies? Is there another movie that I left out? Let me know in the comments below. Take care, and we'll see you next time.